By talking about nutrition and triathlon performance. Kevin Curel, who was supposed to be here today, finally did not get the authorization to be in Paris today. And so that's the reason why I'm very thankful for Laurie for accepting to talk today. Laurie is a PhD student at the Institute. She's working on nutrition. She's conducting research on nutrition. But she is also involved with several Olympic federations to prepare Rio. Okay, and so Laurie is going to present one of her recent research projects we did at INSEP on the relationship between the periodization of nutrition and endurance performance.
Merci Yann.
Thank you, Yann. So I will be replacing Kevin Curel. So I will be speaking in French. I'll be talking about nutrition and triathlon, and for that I will be presenting the results of a study that was carried out last year in partnership with the LAMIS lab of Nice. This study was about a new nutritional strategy to improve performance with periodization of nutrition of intake, and it's called Sleep Load. So based on training, every training program is aimed at improving performance, work capacity, and to develop training adaptations. These are going to be the precursors for improving performance. For endurance performance or triathlon, there will be two types. There will be peripheral and central. And when we talk about nutrition, we are going to be talking about peripheral adaptations. That's increasing muscular oxidation and increasing energy reserves, as well as maximizing the use of substrates or increasing the number and size of mitochondria. So development of all this will begin, first of all, by looking at the content of the training program. So objectives, are we working on speed, power, endurance? And also there's intensity and the frequency of training programs. But the training program itself will not be enough to really change the training. There are other external factors that will maximize these adaptations, such as recovery, wear again, as well as nutrition, rather. So if this is well managed, it will be possible to manage the quality of work to be done during the various sessions of a training program. That will make it possible to ensure the repetition of training loads here where they're very high training loads. And also we look at the needs that are generated by exercise. Within the framework of the work done here in INSEP, we looked at how we could vary nutrition in order to maximize its adaptation to training to improve performance. So we were mostly interested on periodization of carbohydrates to improve endurance performance. Now, to focus on carbohydrates, we would ask that they use a carbohydrate-rich diet, because this is one of the major energy substrates, and this will enable us to put off the feeling of fatigue. It will produce the required energy and increase the ability to exercise. For recovery, we also promote or foster the use of carbohydrates to reduce energy loss. Let's say 1.2 grams per kilogram of weight. for recovery. So the exogenous given, this altering exogenous intake will, as well as altering muscle glycogen and content, will help. And these levers will enable us to modulate carbohydrates available. So as they usually have a lot of carbohydrates, if we change this parameter, one way to manipulate it is to create new training adaptations. And researchers recently tried to understand this by reducing CHO availability based on their training. Could this change their training adaptations? The two levers were either altering exogenous intake or altering muscle glycogen intake. Most studies have separately looked at these two factors. So now to look at what's been done so far and has led us to ask questions about this CHO availability. Let's start with the exogenous glucose, that is low availability of exogenous glucose. So that is in a fasted state doing acute exercise. And the studies carried out show that when exercise is carried out in a fasted state, there's a change in the mobilization of the substrates. So greater oxygenation of the lipids when it's in a fasted state, as opposed to when there are lots of carbohydrates. Other studies have then shown that this fasted state has been made part of their training programs, and there have been adaptations. When we look at the level of oxidation, and we see there are here with these studies we can see which worked on exogenous availability of glucose. We see a change of the substrate during the exercise. However, all these studies do not correlate with improvement of performance. So there can be training adaptations, but they don't necessarily lead to performance improvements. So it's hard to suggest that this be used by trainers, because trainers are looking, or coaches are looking for better improvements. So with regard to training in a fasted state is not a significant change, significant enough to create an improvement in performance. Other studies worked to alter the endogenous carbohydrates or glucose. So this would be 2 types of training per day, or 1 per day, which would mean that the 2 protocols would have the same type of training. So one would be in a fasted state, and there would be, there could be no carbohydrates in between the training sessions. So there were 2 acute exercises. Some studies had showed that when there was low availability, we saw that there was a greater expression of the genes of lipids. So we're trying to capture the carbohydrates in order to make them effective for the purposes of the training. More recently, several studies took an interest over several weeks of this training, 2 hours per day or 1 training session a day. And here again, what we see is adaptation of the energy metabolism, especially in terms of muscular glycogen content, higher lipid oxidation, which echoes what had been said on acute exercise and higher activity of oxidative enzymes. However, again, there's no clear improvement of performance in endurance, so it's not yet that clear whether there is this link. So to date, we see these training adaptations, which will be linked to what we are seeking as in the way of training programs for muscular oxidation when we're talking about energetic substrates. But all these adaptations are not reflected necessarily in any performance improvement. And all the studies which I have briefly expressed were subjects that were not trained. They were untrained or very little trained. Now, with regard to well-trained athletes who have already maximized training adaptations, so will this be enough? It hasn't been studied that much. Most of the studies working on performance were lab studies and not in the field using the knee extensors. These are isolated exercises, and therefore these are not necessarily all the exercises we do in the field. So these are questions that have to be answered. For that, a new nutritional strategy has come to light, what we call the sleep-low strategy. This means intensive training at night to deplete the carbohydrate level or the glucose level in the muscles so that they would eat salad, cheese, and meat, and the next morning there would be training in a fasted state carried out. So this nutritional strategy was discussed for the first time, discussed in 2013. Some studies today, there are only 3 who have discussed this acute aspect of this training. Now, with regard to adapting the training, it's what we had already seen in the other studies that had separated the low availability of glucose, whether it be exogenous or endogenous, less involved in oxidation of the lipids, greater activity of the enzymes transporting this energy, and a greater expression of genes involved in the mitochondrial biogenesis to increase the oxidative quality of the muscles. These did not deal with endurance performance, however. So we wanted to test this with this study. We wanted to look at the chronic aspect of the sleep-low strategy, complete training and dietary program altering both endogenous and exogenous carbohydrate supply. What was original about sleep low is that despite the word low, that does not mean a diet that is low in carbohydrates. It's just periodization, splitting up the carbohydrates over the day. So it's not an overall reduction in carbohydrate intake. That's different from what's been done in the past and what we can see in scientific literature. So here's the protocol of the study. We had 21 triathletes participating in it. It's split into 2 phases. The first of 3 weeks, where athletes had to continue to train and eat in their usual way. In the second phase, we changed both their training and their nutrition, and here we split the two. We split this group into 2 groups. So there were we had the first stage, which showed us that they were trained in this pre-test. In phase 2, we had post-tests then at the end. So with regard to the tests, there were performance tests. We took measurements using DEXA technology and this was with the medical technology department here, and we had blood tests every week in the second phase. And then we had these tests in order to provide a structure and structural framework for this test. The 21 were split into two groups. The sleep-low group was composed of 11 athletes. They had a CHO intake of 6 grams per kilogram of body mass, which is moderate for endurance. And it is simply differently distributed throughout the day. So there's no CHO intake during training sessions, no CHO intake during the recovery phase of the last session of the day. That is none at supper time. And the morning sessions were all completed in a fasted state. The same group had the same CHO intake, so it's just a matter of periodization, not a difference in intake. So they were also consuming 6 grams per kilo, but they could eat those carbohydrates during the breaks and at dinner. So this was followed over 3 weeks. They would come every week to the lab, so we could make sure they were following the training session, and we could continue to give them some nutritional advice. The sleep-low group would eat from 6 after their, or at 10 rather, after their morning session, and there were 7 hours during which they were able to eat the CHO. That is from their breakfast to supper. This is the training program. Irrespective of which group they belonged to, they had to carry this out. These are high intensity, intermittent the evening, which are known to deplete up to 50% of muscular glycogen stores in the morning. They had submax exercises in a fasted state for the sleep-low group. The rest of the time, the training sessions were free, and they just had to have one low-intensity session per day. During the performance tests, the athletes were subjected to 3 tests, one after the other. So these were a submaximal test, during which they could only drink water, and this was an incremental test which enabled us to observe potential physiological changes. 6 minutes at 100 watts, 6 at 60% of their MAP, 6 at 70% of their MAP, and 6 at 80% of their MAP at a free cadence. Then as there was a supramaximal test, that is resistance to fatigue. The subjects had to go out 150% of their MAP, and they would stop when their cadence dropped below 70 RPM. Then 15 minutes of recovery. As we had said, according to other studies, there was what they see on the ground at the end of a triathlon trial. This is something that really strikes a chord with the athletes and coaches. They had to carry out 40 minutes at 70% MAP, followed by 10 kilometers running on an indoor track here at INSEP, which would retrace the conditions of or simulate the conditions of a real performance. All these tests were conducted before and after the changes in nutrition and in periodization. Blood tests were carried out before, during, and after all these weeks, and here are the results in the changes of the plasma epinephrine concentration. There's not a great difference. There's just a trend of an increase of the sleep-low group. This at weeks 2 and 3. There's a 17% increase before beginning the training. So otherwise, there are no significant differences. So this speaks of what? It shows that there is this stimulus which could lead to new types of training. When looking at the submaximal incremental test, you see a reduction in the heart rate significantly for the sleep flow group, and this drop in heart rate is associated with an increase in energy yield for all the levels, for all the sleep flow group members, and these adaptations show greater economy in the race. That's we see the differences. There's a drop in the MAP, so we see greater oxidation of the fat, and this is only significant for the sleep flow group. This strategy, a nutritional strategy with the same training program, shows development of training adaptations, but we don't yet know whether this is going to lead to improved performance. This is what we wanted to see with a high-intensity test. This was the 150% of their possible effort. No significant difference, but a trend to improvement for the sleep flow group with a greater resistance to fatigue of over 10% for the sleep flow group and only 1.8 for the control group. So here again, there's an insignificant group, but a tendency to increase only for the sleep flow group when there is a high-intensity effort being exerted. Now, the field performance test, this is 10 kilometers on a track. All the sleep flow members improve their performance on 10 kilometers with about a 3% improvements, that is reducing their time by 3%. That's about 1 minute through 13 seconds over 10 kilometers. Conversely, the control group did not change their performance between their pre- and post-performances. Only by 2 seconds over 10 kilometers was there any change. So all the sleep flow athletes improved their performance. With regard to body composition, we saw that there was here a drop in body mass. It's the body fat drop is due to the greater mobilization of the oxidation of the fat, of lipids, and so it's reducing the fat storage, and this could lead to a better performance, which means a drop in weight could, for triathletes, be an indication of greater success, and that's perhaps the difference on the 10 kilometers. Despite these net improvements, we also wanted to ensure that this strategy would not have a negative impact of the on the immunity or the quality of sleep. So the subjects had to answer a questionnaire every day regarding infections, upper respiratory tract infections, for instance. We did not see any differences between the two groups, and we did not see any change in terms of the white blood cell count either. The subjects during the two phases had to wear an ActiWatch, which enabled us to look at their sleep efficiency, and again there was no disturbance of sleep after application of this sleep flow strategy. The chronic sleep low strategy is something where we deplete the glucose at night. Then there's fasted training in a fasted state in the morning. This is reducing the glucose that's exogenous and endogenous. This has enabled promoted endurance training adaptation, again with greater oxidation of the substrates, and it did lead to an improvement in physical performance, could also improve triathlon performance, and we've seen that there was an improvement in the body composition by lowering the body fat. So carbohydrates could be a training regulator depending on how available they are, and they could be a factor in training adaptations and therefore could have an impact on performance. Three things explain the improvement of performance within this strategy. All high-intensity exercises were carried out when there was high CHO availability, which deplete the endogenous glycogen stores. So we did it on purpose that these exercises would be done at night when there was a lot of or high CHO availability. After the high-intensity activity, there was a recovery period that would last all night, was without any CHO ingestion, and that's what's important in training adaptations, which occurred during this period, because this is important. More you deprive the body of CHO ingestion, the stronger these genes which are involved in this oxidation will be expressed. We want to increase the expression of these genes. We know that the next day there will be training done in a fasted state and low intensity, because many authors have shown a drop of 8% in a low availability of CHO. So we could not put a high-intensity activity in the morning or exercise in the morning. Yet there are many practical issues that are unanswered with regard to this nutritional study. We look at this. The questions are, for example, when should we plan to have this nutritional strategy in tandem with the training program so that they work hand in hand? Perhaps close to a competition time, perhaps a week or two prior to the competition, maintaining a tapering period, when you have to also make sure that there are no athletes sensitive to hypoglycemia. So you have to be careful if you have any hypoglycemic athletes, and it could be used in blocks, looking at when the competitions are, so the person does not get too accustomed to training in this way. So you'd have to definitely increase your training adaptations. So a great deal of research has yet to be done on the duration of the training low period. If it lasts 3 weeks, so you have this going on for 3 weeks, is 1 week enough for tapering? How long can this adaptation period last? And when should you restore the normal distribution of carbohydrates? We do not have an answer to that question yet. We are conducting a second study on this topic. Thank you.
We have time for only one question. Paul? What?
Yeah, just a comment. Great study. Isn't it interesting that, I mean, there's almost, when I'm looking through that, I can't see any evidence that carbohydrate is that magic bullet that's going to improve any aspect of your training. When you reduced carbohydrate from training, it didn't affect your sleep quality, didn't affect your immune system, and we only saw trends towards better performance. So I guess the next step is how low can we go and how long can we go on that low level of carbohydrates?
I think it's because the low level of carbohydrates is just during a period of time. It's not all during the day. And we know that carbohydrates are very important in the immune function. So we are not lowering the carbohydrate intake, but just periodized differently over the day, so it doesn't impact the immune function.
So maybe the next